Welcome, everyone. Today we'll be talking about AI and accessibility, and that's a really fun and interesting topic that hasn't been talked about too much. So we have a lot to dive into today. And my name is Carrie Lane. I'm a project specialist on the educational technology team at SDCOE, and I'm here with Alicia Gallegos Butters. She's the director of educational technology, and she'll be supporting in the chat if you have any questions or anything that you want to share. A little bit more about me. I served as both a middle school English teacher and a third grade teacher prior to beginning at SDCOE. So I do have a classroom background and a lot of experience adjusting things for students who have different needs and differences in learning. And I also have been really passionate about assistive technology and recently got my assistive technology certification from California State University, Northridge. I put in your slides the link to the resources and also my contact email if you have any questions. And today, when we explore how AI can support with accessibility, we'll go through a number of different kind of examples and things that you might be able to do in your classroom. So hopefully we'll explore some different ways that it can be supporting for accessibility, and then we'll look at tools and strategies that you can use directly. And I always like to leave this slide up. Anytime we're talking about accessibility, it's really important that you check in with your district about their policies regarding accessibility, also extensions, what tools can be used, and always consult with 504 and IEP specialists before deciding to implement any tools or strategies. So this is just advice and some kind of exploration that we're doing here, but none of it is legal. So I'll leave this up for just one more second. And we're going to get started just looking at generative AI. So with a thumbs up in the chat, or if you have your screen up, how many of you have heard about generative AI or have been using generative AI in your classrooms already? Okay, got a couple. Awesome. So it really took off a little before January of last year, and there has been a lot out there where teachers feel overwhelmed by it, teachers feel scared about it. And so this session is really just to look at some of the things that we can do to enhance learning and supporting our students with AI, and also to look at ways that we can do that in a smart, ethical, and meaningful way for our students. So generative AI is when you're generating new content, and that could be images, audio, video. And that content is based on a user prompt. That user prompt usually is going to be text, but it might be an image-based prompt. And the way that generative AI develops the answer or the generation of content is based on what it's learned from patterns and styles that have come before. So it compiles information, it looks at patterns, data sets, and then it pushes back an answer based on your prompt. And so when we look at generative AI, and we think about accessibility, which is making sure that things are reachable by people with disabilities, and that includes products, devices, services, curricula, and environments. When we're trying to make something accessible for students, we actually have a really unique opportunity with generative AI because it provides us with a lot of information and a lot of generated content that would otherwise be tricky to meet the needs of all of our different learners. And so just some interesting information about students with disabilities. In 2021 to 2022, 15% of all public schools received special education or related services under IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Act. Of those, 32% of them were for specific learning disabilities. And so that could be things like dyslexia, that could be related to math learning disabilities, that could be writing disabilities. 45% of schools reported vacancy in special education roles. and 78% reported difficulty in hiring special education staff. So as we start to look at this, and then we think about our learners, and this could be in a special education classroom or in a general education classroom, it's really hard when we have shortages in teachers and shortages in time to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students, especially our students who have learning differences, learning disabilities, any type of disability. And so this is where we can use AI to our advantage. So not only can AI help to diagnose and empower people with disabilities and learning differences, it can also address certain barriers and challenges faced by people with disabilities throughout aspects of their lives. All right. Just curious, does anyone have any questions or anything that they are in particular hoping to learn today about AI and accessibility? And you're welcome to unmute or share in the chat. Okay. At any point, feel free to do so. So the first thing I want to talk about, one way that you can use AI to support accessibility is data analytics for early intervention. And so some of us might be using platforms in our classroom that give students reading or assessment and then or math questions, and based on their responses, it tailors their learning path. And so the way that it's doing that is it's analyzing data. It's using AI to analyze data. And then it's predicting gaps or learning challenges and adjusting the content that it's going to put the user through after that. So it can offer tailored learning paths, it can offer targeted interventions. And a lot of these systems can even provide real-time feedback or suggestions on other learning that you can do to support those learning gaps or challenges. The other thing, and we'll look at a tool that can do this today, is it can create graphical representations of that complex data that might be tripping you up. We're not all data scientists in the education realm. And so using AI for data representation and data analysis is super useful. And so I want to demo for you one example of a tailored learning path. And I put here, I took a little lesson of my own, and when I scored 1 out of 7, it gave me a learning path that told me to keep on practicing, and it did not unlock the next level. When I scored 5 out of 7, it gave me some suggestions on how to do better, and then it told me that I leveled up. And I put here also some examples of other platforms that use a similar personalized learning path based on AI data intervention. Does anyone use any of those? Feel free to share those in the chat. Ready and Con, I ready. Perfect. Star, Freckle. Exactly. So a lot of these programs we're already using, we just didn't quite realize. Yeah, so anything that is gathering that data information and personalizing learning paths is a form. It's not the generative AI necessarily, but it's using predictive paths to determine what kind of machine learning it's going to put you through. All right, so this is an example of Khan Academy. It's just one of those, but it is just one that kind of shows what I mean. When you want to get started on a unit, you would have your students take them, and then they would start perhaps a practice question, and they're going to answer these 7 questions, and I'm just going to randomly pick the answers. Oh, lucky me. Next question. Okay, so I selected something that's incorrect. It tells me to give it another shot, but it also has this option to review related articles or use a hint. And as I start finishing this example, and I'm going to put move on, and I'm just going to keep putting move on as I get things wrong. Oh, wonderful. So it tells me to keep on practicing, and it's going to not really let me continue onto the better learning path until I've moved my way through. And so this is one way that you can use AI with these different programs to take that machine learning and the data analytics and have them give learning paths to your students. Another thing that's interesting, as I mentioned, you can use AI to generate charts. And so if I wanted to see a chart of students with visual impairments in K-12 in San Diego. Needs more information. Interesting. Let's try something else. All right. So there it looks and it tells you your data source. So it's scanning through information and it's giving you all of this information about students with visual impairments in K-12 education. Now, we do always like to say this on our team as we train on AI. AI is not perfect. It uses sometimes biased data sources and it has the occasional tendency to hallucinate, which means that if it doesn't know the answer, it may give you other answers based on what it predicts you want to know. And so it is really important to check the data sources and when you can, triangulate the information you're getting just to make sure it is correct. But this is a quick way for you to be able to generate a chart about something that you're interested in. Any questions on that? And ChartGPT is it is free for 3 of your charts, and then I do believe it goes to a freemium. All right, so we touched on this a little bit just with those personalized learning paths, but AI is a really useful way to personalize and differentiate learning for your students. So you can tailor educational content and pacing to meet individuals' needs. One way that you can do this would be if you are teaching some type of reading or any type of content where you want students to read and gather information from a reading. You can tailor towards specific lexile levels within your prompts for generative AI. It does this using something called natural language processing. And when you have tailored these lexile level summaries or gists of articles, things that you wanted your students to read, you can even tell it to pull out difficult vocabulary words and define them so that you can create those word lists for your kids to support their learning. Another thing that you can do to create personalized learning, a lot of our students are really visual learners or they learn really well from having multimodal teaching. So they have visuals or auditory to go along with written content. So you can use AI and image generators to accompany word problems or whatever type of content you're creating. And this kind of eliminates that need to teach to the middle. As teachers, a lot of us, it's really challenging, like I said before, to find the time to meet the needs of every single student in your class. But AI gives us this opportunity to quickly generate content that supports our different learners. And a lot of times, as we start to do that, it really supports all of our learners. Those, the students who benefit specifically from a picture, well, now our students who benefit from both do really well too. And so some examples of personalization are Microsoft Math Solver, which I'll show you in a second. Also Goblin Tools, which is really interesting. And then Quizzes, which is a freemium platform that gives you individualized insights to your learners' assessments. And it also allows you to make and generate assessments using the platform. And then it differentiates based on those. So let's take a look at Microsoft Math Solver. It looks like this, and you type in a math problem. So let's just for now do the quadratic equation. We'll just solve it this way. And so now what it does is it puts this equation into its information. It tells you the answer. It also tells you ways that you can show steps depending on what you're teaching. So do we want to show steps using the quadratic formula? If we do, we can view solution steps. And it walks your students through all of the different steps. You can also see visuals. So if I hide steps, you can see graphs. You can do a quiz. You can see visuals, videos related to it, find related concepts. And then it also shows you all sorts of examples of it. And so one thing you could do with your students, if you're having a hard time, or if your student is having a hard time understanding all of the steps that are involved with a specific math problem, they can go ahead and they can look at specific steps and then they can explain it to their classmate. And so a lot of times when you have when you have students who need to explain to someone else, they learn better. And so this can make your student the expert because they are seeing the steps and then they're internalizing those steps by becoming the teacher. Any question? All right. And I'm sorry, my screen just jumped out on me, so I'm going to bring it back really quickly. All right. Oh, go on. I think I heard someone unmute.
Yeah, the part on the right-hand side that just disappeared.
Yeah.
What was that? But was that just unrelated, the examples? Like there's like 699 times something. I'm like, I'm not seeing the connection. A quadratic equation, trigonometry, linear equation, like, huh?
I'll be honest, I am not a wonderful person at math. So if I have any math teachers, I will ask them whether any of these relate because I do know that this one relates, but as far as I know, the rest of them don't seem to relate.
Yeah, from what I can see, it looks like it's just other things you can dive into that may relate to this unit. So like quadratics may lead into graphing, which could go into trigonometry kind of graphing, and then linear equations may go into linear quadratic systems. And so they have other things. They basically have a plethora of everything there in case you want something else to dive into that may or may not relate to how you're going to dissect whatever quadratic equation you have, but they all look pretty random. Like they're just giving examples.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't see a connection. Okay.
Good. So it wasn't just me and my math. Perfect. Thank you for asking that, and thank you for the clarification from a math person. All right, so the second one that I want to share is Magic to Do. And this one is really interesting because it gives students a step-by-step process that they can follow when they're doing a certain task. And so maybe if I have a volunteer to just type something in the chat that you teach that has a lot of steps. So that could be, for example, I did one, help me write a thesis statement about why schools shouldn't use uniforms. Completing the square. Is that a math one? I might ask you to unmute again, Omar.
Yes, it is. Lots of
It is,
steps.
yeah.
So how would you complete the square? Would that be what I type in? Hopefully it's smart enough to know that.
Maybe in a quadratic equation at the end, but hopefully it works. I don't know.
Let's see. So it's doing when you hit the little AI button. Yep, okay. So now it says start with the quadratic equation and then move the constant term. And so it gives you step by step. And as you hit these little break down the item AI buttons, it'll break it down into even smaller steps if necessary. And so this could be really useful for your students who maybe struggle with the process of something, but they can get it done when it's in front of them. They can do something like this, have it up, and then they can use that to move through the steps of doing something that has so many steps that it can be really confusing. All right. Any questions on that? Is Goblin Tools only for math? No. So let's do how to cook a beef Wellington. And then it's going to give you the information. And again, it may not be completely perfect because it's using what it compiled from other information out there, probably recipes for a beef Wellington, but it should at least give some steps that are very useful. Visual schedules could work too. And Jennifer, in terms of visual schedules, that's an opportunity also where you could have them do this, and then you could use something like Canva, which has a free teacher account. And if you have the free teacher account, you can use that to generate AI. I do that all the time. Almost all of the pictures in this PowerPoint are Canva AI, Magic AI generator, and then they can generate AI to go with it, or you can have them print this out and then find AI to go with it. And I can link to that later on too. It's actually in a menu that I'll share with you at the end as well. All right. So those are some examples of personalization with AI. And then the other thing I thought would be fun is to show you what it could be like if you have a really difficult topic or difficult text, and then you have it rewritten at a different Lexile level or a younger grade level, and then have it pull out the information. So, and I think I actually already pulled this up, so let's just go back into here. Interesting. Okay, so a topic that is kind of challenging, maybe a little bit confusing for people might be something about investing money in a 401k or pension plan. So write 3 sentences about investing money in a 401k for a pension plan. And just to show you if it was a really difficult text with a lot of academic vocabulary and jargon. And so now, as you can see, and I'll give you a second to look at it. Pretty confusing. And if we had our students reading something like this, and this could be the way that they feel about something that we've given them in class, that's pretty tough, and it's going to be a really easy way for them to shut down on learning. So instead, if I said, write about this topic, at a 4th grade level. You'll notice it starts putting in similes. It's using super easy, understandable vocabulary, things like that. And if I had wanted to on this top one, I could say something like, pull out a list of 5 words that are challenging about pension planning and investing. And then it will pull out the list of words. You can say, define those words. And it'll do that too. And so this is a great way to take things that might be difficult for your students and adjust them to make them closer to the level that your students need. And this can be adjusted. Not only do you have to do all the work for this, but if your school site is allowing AI, this is something that students can even do for themselves. They can, talk about what's difficult for them and have it written in a way that meets their needs. They can even have it written in about a topic that is interesting to them. You could do it with the theme of escape rooms, and it will turn this up to have that too. So you can make it thematic, you can make it leveled. It's really interesting. Any questions on that? All right. So now we move into assistive technology and AI.
Carrie, I just wanted to point out why that's such a great tool for students, because it puts the learning in the students' hands. And it's also about that equity and access. So you can ask it to create something at whatever level you as a student feel you're at. And it's something that you can do privately without judgment. And I love that you're able to do that. So thank you for pointing that out.
I had a quick question, if that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be the downer. I'm just asking, can I have AI check if AI was used? Because I get a lot of the English teachers at our school saying, oh my gosh, this essay, there's no way this kid wrote this essay, blah, blah, blah. So do you guys know, is there a way for AI to check if AI was used to create the essay?
Carrie, do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, you can answer, and I might just add on a couple of things at the end, but yes, please go ahead.
Yes, you can. There's lots of tools out there that will check AI. And what it will tell you is this is 95%, this is 50%, et cetera, et cetera. But what I tell people is there's usually this pattern that AI does follow. And as a teacher, you'll know that pattern. But again, as an educator and as a teacher myself, what I always tell people, things are changing. And if the only way that you are assessing your students is by the final essay or the final writing, then that's where things need to change a little bit, because AI is out there and students are going to use it. So you have to start thinking about more the process of learning and writing. And as a former English teacher, I think about that as all the time. And as a professor at San Diego State, I think about that all the time as well, about what is the process that the students are going through and what types of formative assessments am I giving them along the way. But to answer your question, yes, there's plenty of tools out there that do check to see if it's been AI generated. They're not perfect.
Thank you, Alicia. And the other thing I would add on to that is be creative with your use of AI. So if you have students, maybe you have students write the essays in the classroom, but then you have students who are reading through AI, there's one called Perplexity AI where it gives you all of its sources, and they can look through the sources and decide whether those are accurate and, have a lesson about media literacy and research within the AI piece. And I was an English teacher as well. And so there are checkers that will check for you. As Alicia said, they're not perfect. And I think it's really just a matter of, if your school is diving into AI, sorry, I keep saying accessibility, into AI, finding ways that you can use it to support while still making sure that you are teaching critical skills in a way where you get to see student writing. Maybe it's just done in the classroom or done in a different way. But thank you for the question, because lots of people have it. And Turnitin, I believe, does check, yeah. Okay, so AI and assistive tech. The World Health Organization estimates that more than 2.5 billion disabled people will need one or more assistive technologies in 2030. AI-powered assistive technologies help students with different learning abilities to access and comprehend educational materials. And so there are a lot of examples of AI and assistive tech. Some that we might be using pretty regularly, speech to text. Anytime we're using voice recognition on our phones, that's an example of assistive tech. text to speech, when we have something like a Google voice and it's typing for us, or we have something, sorry, that was speech to text, or we have something where we are typing and then it's screen reading out loud to us. That would be an example of text to speech. If you have a program that provides automatic captions, they're not perfect, but those auto captions are using AI. Image and facial recognition. And I know in PowerPoints, if you look at, they'll have suggested alternative text. That's AI. There's even lip reading recognition. You can have optical character recognition, which can transform Braille characters into digital text. So you can type in digital text and it'll become Braille. You can also have Braille and it'll turn it into digital text. So there's a lot out there, eye tracking technology that can allow people to control computers using their eyes. You can use voice technology and it'll control it using a voice. So there are so many. And I put a few on these slides. Unfortunately, I won't be able to show you. I was really hoping to preview for you Seeing AI, but I will just tell you a little bit about that app because it's a really good example of assistive technology that's free and you can download the app onto your phone. And what it does is you hover it over things like barcodes or money or a text. You can also hover it over written text. You can hover it over like a room and it'll tell you what the room is showing. You can hover it over colors. And so all of these things, it'll read barcodes and tell you what the item is. It will read money and tell you what the denomination of the money is. It'll read through a text and tell you what the text says. And so this is a super useful example of assistive technology for visual impairments. I recommend checking it out. Some other ones that you can check out are Project Euphonia, which analyzes speech recordings to train speech recognition. Grammarly, a lot of us use Grammarly to support our writing. Roger Voice is one that's freemium and it transcribes conversations for individuals who have hearing impairments. And there are a lot of apps that do transcribe information. We'll be looking at some captioning things in a few. Any questions? Okay. The next thing you can use AI to support is language translation and localization. So AI can translate, it can transcribe, it can caption into multiple languages. So a lot of us are using either Google or Microsoft, and there are so many different languages that they can transcribe your voice into. So for example, if I wanted to, just within this Google slide deck that I'm doing, I could turn on my captions right now and it would transcribe everything that I'm saying. With Google, it only transcribes it into English. But if you're using Microsoft, and we'll look at this in a couple of minutes, you can actually have it subtitle into different languages than the language you're speaking, which is a game changer. I'm going to turn this off for a second. All right. You can also translate written or spoken language to sign language. And you can use localization features within AI to adapt content to meet cultural context. So again, we kind of did that with the difficult article and we made it easier. If you have specific students in your class and you know a little bit about their culture, you can enter in information and have it generate more information that makes it more relevant to their culture. And you can use it with things like Duolingo to help students learn another language. So I put a couple of examples here. We just saw the Google translation feature. There's also just Google Translate in general that you can use for translating text. Duolingo is a really good example of that personalized learning path based on the data it collects. And you can also do presentation translator. And so an example of that would be, I have my Microsoft slides right here. And if I go into slideshow, I have toggled always use subtitles. And then I can decide my spoken language, English. And my subtitle language, let's do Estonian today. And as soon as I start presenting, you'll notice that what I'm saying isn't going to be transcribed. Instead, what's going to be transcribed is Estonian. And so I personally can't say how accurate these are, but in general, AI transcription has gotten a lot better over the years. So while it won't be perfect, it is generally pretty good in the realm of like 70 to 85% for most platforms. It depends on which one.
Carrie, can you say the name of that tool again, please?
The one I'm just showing?
I believe so, yes.
It's the basically it is the transcription subtitle tool within Microsoft PowerPoint. So as long as you're using Microsoft or OneDrive, you can use the slideshow, always use subtitles, and select the subtitle and spoken language.
And then also, will this work for videos? Like if you're in a video conversation?
So in a video conversation like today on Zoom, and actually let me do that as well, Zoom has the same type of transcription services. For the most part, when you do captioning, they are generally in the caption language English to start, but the captions within Zoom, for example, I could caption this into different languages. It's an option. So let's see how that turns out. Let's put it into Italian. And it says, do I want to change the caption language? And now if you click on who can see the transcript, you'll be able to see all of the transcript in Italian. So it's subtitling as we talk. Microsoft Teams also has the same thing where you can turn on captions and you can adjust the language. So that's for video calls. And then if you are using YouTube, you can do the same thing where you can auto caption all of your videos once they're in your Creator Studio, and you can change it to different languages. All right. Any other questions? So let's talk a little bit about chatbots and tutors. Not only do we as educators have the opportunity to adjust our content for our students using AI, and we can allow students to adjust content for themselves using AI, but there are also a lot of AI-driven chatbots out there, virtual tutors that offer round-the-clock support. This might be useful for students who don't feel comfortable speaking in front of a class or asking for help from their teacher. And what they do is they use natural language processing and understanding, as well as that machine learning, so the pattern learning, to provide instant and personalized support. And so a couple of examples, I linked Brainly here. That's one homework help platform. And then EduGPT is another one, and I'll preview this one for you because I like the way that it shows its chatbots. And so, for example, here's my EduGPT. When you're logged into it, it has different chatbots for different subjects. So for example, if I'm the Canvas person at SDCOE. So if I'm doing a training on Canvas, I might point people towards the Canvas chatbot because when you click chat now, it's going to give you technical support all about Canvas. Now, in a teaching context, it can show me what it would recommend for dyslexia, autism, dyscalculia, ADHD. Or you can look at different grade levels. So there's a 3rd grade teacher, there's a 5th grade teacher. And so you can really hone into specific subjects, specific grades, specific learning disabilities or differences. You can hone into specific platforms, and then you just chat with a teacher. And so we'll stay away from math because we all learned how great I am at that. All right, 9th grade teaching. How may I assist you with your 9th grade teaching today? And then I need to sign in, but basically as I would sign in, let's see, where's my sign in? Hopefully this doesn't change. back to my people. And you know what, we'll just do Ms. Baker, kindergarten teaching assistant. And then it's going to give you a lesson plan. And as educators, we can then look at this and decide what we like, what we don't like, adjust it to meet the needs of our students. But we've now saved about 80% of the work and can adjust it to our learning standards, our specific students, what we want to do in our classroom. And so just like with ChatGPT, you can be as specific as you want with this. We've even played around, a couple of my coworkers have played around with making things ominous, and it will make this whole lesson ominous or scary or funny. And so it's really up to you how you like to adjust your lessons, but it's a good starting point. And when you're using AI, there's a recommended 80 to 20% effort level. So AI can do about 80% of the work for you, but that 20% is really up to you to make sure that you are taking things into consideration. Like, is this a strong lesson? Are you checking it? Are you making sure that everything is factually accurate? Does it meet the needs of your learner? And this one's really important. Make sure you don't share any personal information about students. So you do not include student names. You don't include personal information. At most, you're just saying maybe what a grade level would be, or what a specific reading challenge might be, but don't include that with information about the specific students. All right. And then the last one, or the second to last one, is automation, grading, and feedback. And so we've seen a lot of these just throughout this presentation, that you can get grading just through these platforms that have the data and then it grades the information. But you can also use it to check homework. You can use it to create feedback. And so if I go into ChatGPT and I type in create 10 different types of feedback I can give to my students for report card comments, it will give me a list of 10 sets of comments that I can give to my students, and then I can use those bases to tailor it to my students. You can use it for other administrative tasks. If you need to write a letter home to parents, it can write letters. It can support with IEP goal writing, but this one I would be really careful to make sure that you're talking with your administration and anyone in your school who supports 504s and IEPs. It can support lesson creation, quiz creation. It can really do so many different things for you. You just kind of need to know there's something called prompt engineering. And so you need to know what the best way to type your prompt would be. And so I'll show you one more tool that's really useful. And we did a session on AI for productivity. And so I've compiled here a menu of AI for productivity tools that I'll also share with you and explain how that works after I show you Magic School AI. So for example, Magic School has this option called Magic Tools. Let me move this. And we'll just say other and elementary. For some reason, my screen is not showing me. There we go. Save. Okay. So Magic School AI is a really cool AI tool because it's meant for teachers. And so it gives you options to do report card comments. It gives you options to write informational text, generate rubrics, generate IEPs, text summarize, text translator. And so I even today was working on a choice board for UDL. And so if you're familiar with UDL, it's the idea of multiple means of representation, engagement, things that you can do for your students that will make learning more accessible to them. And so if you have and I put multimodalities and I generate it, it's going to give me all sorts of options that you can use to have a choice board about the specific topic. And so you can do this for UDL choice boards. You can do this, I think one that's kind of useful is report card comments. We'll say for now, she is good at reading, areas of growth, confidence. And it will write your report card comment for you then to go back and adjust. And again, that prompt engineering, how much you put into it, how much you explain is going to make a big difference on the quality of what you get as well. And in this slideshow, if you go to the slide that we were just on, which was slide number 32, there's a link that says menu of productivity tools. And what you have there is this productivity tool menu. So my colleague and I went through a lot of AI tools. And as we did, we saw which ones were useful, which ones were freemium, free. So we didn't pick anything that was not at least freemium. We explained what the cost would be and what you can do with each thing, gives you a little summary, and then we tested out each of these different prompts. So can it create activities and lessons? Can it create quizzes? Can it create report card comments, IEP goals, letters of rec, letters home? And then based on how quickly and how efficiently it created those, we just did our own little starring system. Doesn't mean it's perfect. You may disagree. But just for us to get started and make it easier for you, we went through and we did that and we linked to where you can find them. The link to the slides, I can share that at the very end, but it was at the top of our conversation as well. And I will share the link directly to the menu of tools too. And then one more thing that I think is kind of useful is there is an app called There's an AI for That. And There's an AI for That is a specific tool that helps you find an AI for what you're looking for. And so if you're looking for an AI that generates charts, it will go through and it'll tell you all of the different AIs that are out there to generate charts. Okay, back to my slideshow. Any questions? Thank you, Alicia, for sharing the bit.ly link. All right, and so the last one that I put in here for ways to use AI for accessibility, and there are actually quite a few more, but I really did try to limit it to some of the ones I thought would be most relevant for educators, is creating accessible content. So when you are using or when you're creating content, you can use AI to help you make sure it's accessible. And so especially if you're using things like Microsoft has really good AI for accessibility that will create alt text for images. So if it sees an image of a dog in a field, it will say something like suggested alternative text, dog in field. It will create transcripts for you, and Google will do that too. Like we showed earlier, you can use Zoom, Teams, Google Slides, PowerPoint for subtitles and captions, YouTube. You can also use it to create 3D models, simulations. Virtual reality uses AI. You can create customizable interfaces using larger fonts, high contrast options, voice commands. There have been times when I'm trying to create a program for something on the computer and I type it in and it will tell me all of the steps and the code needed to create a customizable interface and adjust the font. And I didn't even have to know how to code. So there are things that it makes life easier for us to then make things more accessible for our audiences. And the last one that I want to show is an accessibility checker, because checking for accessibility is one way to make sure that your content is really accessible for your students. And so if you're using Microsoft, then you can go in and hit review on your slideshow, and it has this check accessibility button, and it goes through and it'll tell me what I'm missing. So in this one, it's telling me that 4 of my pictures are missing alternative text. I can go back in and then I can add alternative text to my pictures. It then has warnings, check reading order. It's having me check to make sure that the order is correct so that when a screen reader reads it, it will go in the correct order. It has some other suggestions like duplicate slide titles. If you have multiple slides that have the same title, that's going to be confusing to someone who's listening with a screen reader. So you want to go back in and change your slide titles. It will also, if, for example, I put a very yellow highlight onto here, let's see, it should now tell me that I have a new warning, hard to read contrast, and it's going to tell me that I need to fix my contrast. And so as you go through, there are things that you learn just from doing it, that these are going to be errors you want to look out for. But you can also use the accessibility checker to help you. Grackle Docs is the content accessibility checker for Google. I cannot preview that one for you just because at SDCOE we don't have it enabled, but you can look into that. Or what I usually do is I download my Google content into Microsoft and then I use the accessibility checker because it's really good. And we touched on quite a few of these, but just to remind you, when you're using AI, it's really important to protect your students' personal identifiable information. So there's no need to put in any kind of information that identifies your students while engineering your prompts. You can still have general information and make it just kind of openly specific to your student. Additionally, a lot of times AI stereotypes, and Alicia, if you want to share your experience, that might be an interesting one. But generally, just know that AI does have a tendency to stereotype based on what it's seen in data sets before. And so it's important to remember that our students with disabilities or learning differences, they're all different. And so what we get from AI may not be meeting the needs of that particular student just because it's, let's say, a student with dyslexia. That doesn't mean that AI is going to be the cure-all for giving us suggestions or adjusting content based on that. And AI is often missing data or may not recognize certain people or labels. So a lot of the data that's out there is not about individuals with disabilities. So they may be missing or not represented in the data it's pulling from, which will then make some of the information that it's using incorrect or unreliable. And I'll turn it over to Alicia because I saw she unmuted for a second.
Yeah, so when we first started playing around with AI, I wanted to see what it would generate for me. I have kind of this unique case where my daughters are identical triplets, and they're now in their 20s, but they were really cute when they were babies. So I wanted to see what it would generate. I am a Mexican American. My husband is actually from Scotland. So I put into the search engine for the generator, for the AI generator, Mexican, Scottish triplet babies. And I've done it numerous times. And what comes out, usually they're like these really cute faces, little girls with like little pug noses, very cute, but they have on a sombrero and a kilt. And it always comes up like that. Sombrero, kilt, and some sort of like really festive shirt. So again, when Carrie is talking about those stereotypes, it does end up bringing up some stereotypes based off of what it's looking for, because I'm sure that I probably have one of the only sets of half Scottish, half Mexican identical triplets in the world. They're that rare. So anyway, so that is something that it does do that you need to be aware of. But it's kind of fun to do that.
Thank you, Alicia. So we did just want to share with you those kind of considerations, things to think about, that idea of you put in 20% of the work to make sure that the content that you're giving to the students meets the needs. And that concern that did come up with the idea of plagiarism and students using it as their own original work. I can definitely say from reading AI responses, none of my students had the kind of grammar and sentence structure that AI seems to have. And so I feel like in general, even without AI checkers, you can still know who your students are and kind of see whether they're doing their own work and use AI to help them rather than worrying necessarily about AI taking away their skills, because it can be that scaffold or that coach that is useful for your students. So we have just a couple of minutes. Does anyone want to share any questions, any takeaways, next steps? While you do that, and you can unmute or share it in the chat, I'm just going to leave up the schedule for the next few sessions. And if you know anyone who'd like to attend any of the future sessions, please share the network registration with them. We are happy to have more people join us in this accessibility network. Thank you for sharing.
I just want to acknowledge what a great job Carrie's doing on this series. She puts in so much work to find all of these resources. So thank you, Carrie.
Thanks, Alicia, and thank you everyone for coming.
I have a question that's not really related to student accessibility,
Sure.
but for me, I am doing national boards and I have to do videos. And then it takes a very long time to transcribe those. So I'm wondering, what is there for, you already have the video, and then what can you do to get it to get a transcript of it?
So in terms of free transcription, you can transcribe using YouTube. It won't be perfectly accurate, but you can use the editor within YouTube to then go back and check it. If you have Canvas, they use Screencast-O-Matic, and you can go in and check the captions there. I personally go in and use Screencast-O-Matic. It is a paid one that we have, but the captioning is pretty accurate, and then I use that and go back in and check. Otherwise, you kind of have to pay for different companies to transcribe. Usually they do it by like the word count, things like that. And Alicia might know more about paying for it. But most platforms, I would just look up, depending on how accurate it needs to be, I would look up the accuracy for different platforms like YouTube. You can use the Zoom one, things like that, and see what that accuracy rate is. But if it needs to be perfectly accurate, and in terms of the guidelines for accessibility, it should be accurate, I would use something like a Screencast-O-Matic or go in and re-edit the YouTube ones.
And I think
Well,
Cast-O-Matic it gives you a free, you can do it for free up to 5 minutes.
oh.
And somebody brought up Otter AI. So there's a lot of tools out there that you can use. You just have to Google them and see what your needs are for that amount of time.
So mostly it's just for me to gather what's been said, right? It's for me to be able to analyze what the kids are doing and show the people, the assessors, that I did. It just takes a really long time, you know, so anything that could help.
I mean,
and of
you, if you're doing that, you can always, sometimes, I mean, and this is kind of old school, so you can turn on Google, like I've done this before at meetings where I've put Google, like I've opened up a Google page, just a doc, and then I put on the microphone and then it starts to gather what people are saying. I have to go back and retranscribe it. So
Well, yeah, I'm sure that if I did this, I would have to, but like last year, I was trying to do this and I
yeah,
only had one hand for typing, so it just was taking way
I
longer.
bet. Yeah,
So I
so
was just trying to figure out if there was something that
I'm not
I
sure,
at
but
least could get the general, and then I would still be able to.
Elizabeth, can we actually table that just because we're kind of going over time and I want to see if anybody has questions based off of this session real quick. Just, and we could table that and come back to it. Any questions about the accessibility that Carrie went over? Okay, so yes, Carrie just said auto captioning for YouTube would also work for you.
Okay,
All
thank
right,
you.
you're welcome. All right, well, thank you, Carrie.
Thank you. And again, you can reach out to me if you have questions too.